and all-powerful, starting with the elderly wolf uncle chapter 53. However, didn't Chen just go out? How did it disappear so quickly? After Lana walked out of the restaurant door, she looked left and right but found that she couldn't see Chen Tian's figure everywhere. Doubts, but more of a concern and eagerness for Clark. There was no other way but to look around. Meanwhile, a little further outside the West Campus cafeteria is an unexplored forest with no surveillance and sparsely populated area. Boom! There was an extremely heavy muffled sound of landing. Jerome fell to the ground on his back, grinning. And in front of him, Clark, who was tall and burly, was looking at each other with a complicated face. This was the first time he had met someone other than himself with unique abilities. It turns out that he is not the only freak on this planet. Suddenly, the loneliness in Clark's heart was inexplicably eliminated by half. Damn it. Then, on the ground, Jerome cursed, slightly embarrassed, and stood up with his hands on the ground. Just you want to stop me? He cursed angrily at Clark, clenching his fists as soon as he stood up. Next second, a dense arc of electricity that bloomed with dazzling light suddenly jumped wildly on his fist, and the blue electric light dispelled the darkness within several meters around him. Under the light of electric light, you can also see Jerome's face twisted and hideous, and her eyes are wide with anger. Die! He roared and punched. Boom! One punch blasted. As a result, Clark stretched out a large hand and easily grabbed Jerome's fist that wrapped around the arc of terror. Snap! 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 The arc on Jerome's fist was suddenly powerful, and endless electricity suddenly filled Clark's body, spreading along the ground, and endless thunder light filled the entire space zero. And Clark endured all this, his eyes still did not change, and he did not even wrinkle his brows. Those arcs that were constantly shining on his body seemed to be non-existent and did not affect him at all. He wrinkled his brows and looked at Jerome. Damn it, you have also awakened your powers. What is your power? Why help them? Quote. Jerome looked at the scene in front of him, and finally returned from the experience of a god who had just descended like a god and could control the fate of mortals at will. Only then did he realize that when Clark took him out of the restaurant, he reacted that the other party was actually a superpower. It's just that because Jerome is too emotional, coupled with the speed at which Clark brought him out, it was too fast. So much so that he reacted a second slower. You'd better stop before there are no casualties, or you'll never be able to turn back, if you continue like this. Everyone else will reject you and you won't be able to continue to stand in the crowd. Quote. Clark did not answer the other party's words directly, but opened his mouth to admonish. He finally saw an outlier like himself, and didn't want the other party to embark on a road of no return. Showing power will make others repel, so don't show it. When Jerome heard Clark's words, he raised his eyebrows, as if he had heard some big joke. You are so real. Don't you realize that the rules of this world are always made by the strong? Can't stand in the crowd? Who cares about that kind of thing? Who's going to get a foothold in the crowd? I don't want to stand in a crowd. I'm going to let everyone gather around me, all afraid of me. All on my knees. Submit to. Seeing that Jerome's voice became louder and louder, his emotions became more and more excited. Clark's brows gradually wrinkled, and neither of them noticed that in the forest not far away, Chen Tian had been standing under the tree watching all this. You. Clark listened to Jerome's maniacal words, his face was ugly, and he opened his mouth to continue persuading. You better forget it. Rubbish. Which thinks. Jerome didn't want to say more to him at all, his eyes widened angrily, and a dazzling electric light suddenly erupted on one leg, and he suddenly raised his leg and kicked at the other party. Electricity and light. Alas. Seeing this, Clark sighed helplessly. Boom. The big hand suddenly pressed on Jerome's chest, and all the electric light was blasted away by him at this moment, and the whole person flew out upside down. Directly crashed into a large tree more than 10 meters away. The trunk trembled violently, shaking off the fallen leaves, and Jerome slid down the trunk and fell to the ground. Your ability, much stronger than me. He struggled to stand up against the tree trunk, his face pale, and he only felt that he seemed to be loaded by a truck just now, and his body was in pain. You'd better kill me, or I'll make you regret it for the rest of your life. However, Jerome still raised his head, stared at Clark's slightly tangled face, and said with a smile. From the conversation just now, he expected that the big man on the other side was simply a giant beast that had shackled himself 2.2, and he didn't know the value of his strength. This kind of guy can't kill him. Clark, just as you speak. With a call, Chen Tian's figure walked out of the forest and just walked not far from Jerome's side. Chen. Seeing this, Clark's pupils shrank sharply, and a heart hung up. Jerome didn't have anything to do with him at all, but it was different when he faced Chen Tian. Stay away from him. Danger. Clark was visibly panicked. After all, he knew that the other party had come with him because he was worried about him, or if he was one of the few people who could be called a friend. So he immediately shouted a reminder towards Chen Tian, and at the same time was ready to rush over and take him away. But Jerome noticed this and immediately rushed towards Chen Tian without hesitation. You know, these ordinary people are no different from ants in our eyes. He shouted loudly and shook his fist, and his fist was full of electric light. However, Chen Tian saw this scene, and the corners of his mouth outlined an imperceptible arc. Next second, syllable, a slender and well-defined palm had easily pinched Jerome's neck. Whether it's a man of steel, or mastering the same lightning power. All let the arc on the latter's body not hurt Chen Tian in the slightest. Damn it, how is it another monster? Quote. Jerome roared inwardly and his heart contracted. Such a reaction fell in Chen Tian's eyes, as funny as a clown. Clark, this is the first lesson. He thought. Start slowly tightening your fingers. Chen, Clark, who was going to leave to save Chen Tian, was stunned when he saw this scene. Chapter 1